Greetings everyone, I am Dr. J, and, well, another Nintendo Direct has come and gone, and there was a lot to talk about in this one. For those of you unfamiliar with this channel, I spend a decent amount of time playing through Nintendo games nowadays, so, well, may as well talk about what first-party titles were announced. There was a lot announced there, but what I generally find is whenever I try and do reactions to Nintendo Directs, I usually don't have all that much to say in the moment, because at the time my focus is just on, okay, so this is the new stuff, okay, let's go ahead and let it speak. Let's go ahead and let it have its time in the sun, and then I can always just pick it apart later if there's anything that I specifically want to look at. So for the last time that I recorded a reaction, or at least uploaded a reaction, was back when they announced Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, so that should give you an idea as to how often I do post my reactions. I do record them, I just usually don't have all that much to say. But now that I've had time to think it all over, well, let's see what they have to say for themselves. So, with that in mind, there were a couple of things that I won't be touching on, specifically Pikmin 4 and Splatoon, because I just don't have all that much knowledge about them and don't really play console shooters, so we'll go ahead and skip over those. The real thing I want to talk about, though, at least to start out with, we finally got a release date for the Advance Wars Remaster. Holy crap, it's about damn time. Because this thing has been delayed, and then delayed forever. And that is not even an exaggeration. Seriously. First, it was delayed once because you think, okay, so they need a bit of time to polish it up. And then they decide, you know, our game has a Russia lookalike invading another country. Russia just actually did that. I don't think it's a good time to release this game. And at the time, that might have been a fine decision, but I don't think anyone expected the war in Ukraine to last as long as it did, and that is all that I'm going to comment on that particular topic, because I'm not a political channel or a current events channel, so that is all I will say on that count. I don't think anyone expected it to last as long as it has, so I think Nintendo finally realized, okay, the news cycle around it has died down. Now that we've announced that it's going to come out in a couple of months, we're probably going to have something crazy happen in the world, because honestly, this franchise is cursed. I mean, the first game came out a day before 9/11. That's not even an exaggeration, that's literally what happened. And I think the second game came out within days of the US invasion of Iraq, which naturally means something else is gonna happen in order to prompt them to delay it. I guarantee it. So I'm sat there thinking, okay, it's nice that we have a release date for April, but I'm sat there going, that still leaves a couple months for something crazy like China to invade Taiwan or something, so we will see what happens. We will see what happens. I really do hope that they stick to this, independent of whatever else happens in the real world, because, I mean, what kind of tactical acumen is a real-world country seriously going to get from a video game? Yeah, I don't see that happening. So with that in mind, it is a little disappointing that they didn't just straight up release it, but it does make sense in hindsight when you think about it, because when I initially saw this, I'm thinking, okay, I mean, I got my wish for them to actually give me a release date, but there was some suspicion that it might come out a couple days after the Direct was over, which, given that Fire Emblem Engage is still in the news cycle, given that people are still playing through it, myself included, yeah, it doesn't make sense to release this soon. So that makes sense to me. Give it a couple months for people to be aware of it, to buy physical copies if they so desire, especially since there are people like me who like to have the physical edition of any console game. I can generally guarantee that Steam will stay up, and I can generally guarantee that there's enough going on within the internet for PC gaming to where I can justify digital, especially since I can always create something on my NAS if I so desire as well, to have a hub for pretty much everything I've ever bought on a digital storefront. I do not have that freedom on a console, so when I can, I'd like to buy physically, so this ensures that, hey, places like Amazon, Walmart, GameStop, all the rest will actually have physical copies to hand out to people, and it also means that they'll actually be able to sell it because not everyone will be honed in on Fire Emblem Engage. From a business standpoint, I understand it. From a purely fan perspective, I'm sat there going, this has been done for a while, hasn't it? Can you just give it to me now? Please? I want it now. I seriously, just, well. We don't always get what we want. It's probably for the best, though, otherwise I would never finish Fire Emblem Engage, because I've been having fun with it, I haven't been liking the story. That's probably the best way to put it thus far. Speaking of which, we got DLC announcements for Xenoblade 3 and Fire Emblem Engage. Both of them have expansion passes that are ongoing, and I probably shouldn't have watched what they showed for Xenoblade 3, because I've only played the first game, and I'm sat there going, oh, hi, I know you. I'm pretty sure I know who you're supposed to be. What the hell's going on? What led to this point? Why is this a thing? Why is this happening? What? Yeah, I should not have watched that. Because now for Xenoblade, I'm gonna sit there thinking, it's gonna be probably over a year before I can actually even start to think about playing Xenoblade 3 as a result of how long it's taken me just to finish with the first game. I'm going to be waiting a while, aren't I? I'm not going to get any answers for any of the questions that this one sparked. Am I? So, yeah, that's going to be fun. So, I'll have to step up how much time I spend getting through the Let's Play stuff for Xenoblade 1 and finishing up the review. Luckily, I am making good progress on that. I'm about 95% of the way through the script. I think I need to add a little bit more for New Game Plus and a little bit more to one point in the spoiler section, and then I'm basically done as far as making a review for Xenoblade 1. And then for the Let's Play content, I've got a sheet that I use in order to keep track of everything. I think it says I've got about 7 hours worth of footage that I need to look over and break up into Let's Play videos, so I am getting there. It's just, well, that just means I get to start on the second game, and given how long the first game was, yeah, it's gonna take a while. But either way, Fire Emblem Engage. There was expansion pass news there as well, mostly focused around the new emblems and giving a teaser for the story content. Honestly though, I don't have any interest in the Engage expansion pass, not at all. And the simple reason for that is that in Wave 1, they decided, hey, you know those optional stat boosters and extra auxiliary battles you got with the Three Houses expansion pass? Well, what if we give you some optional stat boosters again, but what if we also bundle it in with a 30% discount to the weapon and item shop? I do not know if it is possible to avoid that 30% discount, and if it works the same way that the Three Houses stuff does, I'd assume that it is possible to not use that, but I'm sat there going, this is literally pay to win. The gold crunch has been well, it's not been a serious problem for my current run. I'm only about to hit chapter 10 in the main story, and I believe that there's 26 chapters in total. So it's not as if it's the biggest deal ever, but I'm also sat there going, wow. I'm seeing a pattern of behavior here that I don't like, because I already had problems with them including optional stat boosters and the extra auxiliary battles in Three Houses, because it wasn't as if the extra auxiliary battles were story related, it just made grinding easier, because typically the new auxiliary battles, well, the only thing quote-unquote new with them is that they had new music, and they were also generally a higher level compared to the auxiliary... They were generally a higher level compared to the auxiliary battles that you normally got to play with. So because of that, I'm sat there thinking, it was already a little easier to grind, and as a result of that easier grind and the optional stat boosters, it made my Maddening mode run easier than it should have been. Because I think if I were to go back and look at the video that I have of Maddening mode, especially for Chapter 4 and the second half, I think it did make a difference in a couple places to where it was easier than it should have been, because there's one point in particular where you could easily get stonewalled if you're not prepared for it, and I think I did dip into those optional stat boosters to get around that particular problem. So yeah, it was already a case where I'm sat there thinking that this feels very pay to win. It feels scummy somehow, and it's not as if this is EA levels of bad, it's not as if this is Activision Blizzard levels of bad, but I'm also sat there going, this is a pattern of behavior. I mean, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, third time is enemy action, I don't want to wait around for a third time, because I know that I've seen where companies go when it comes to this sort of thing. I don't want it to reach this point with Nintendo. And so even if the story content ends up being the most amazing thing ever within this DLC pack, no, I'm not touching it. I'm just not touching it. So, that's all that really needs to be said about that. On to some more positive news, which sort of touches on something a little curious. The Metroid Prime Remaster. Honestly, I was very happy to see this. I am still very happy to see this, and I'm even happier about the fact that, hey, you can't get a physical copy until the 22nd, but you know what? You can buy the digital version right the hell now. And, you know what? One of the concerns I may have had about this, well, two of the main concerns. One, where's Metroid Prime 2 and 3? Two, well, is this going to be Skyward Sword where you charge $60 for a remaster when the original game cost $50? And fortunately for us, that was not the case. They actually charged $40 for it. Thankfully, it is $40. It is just $40, which means it is not a full-priced re-release. It is not a matter of, okay, so you paid $50 for the entire Metroid Prime trilogy, and it's kind of annoying that you have to pay $40 for a remaster because of that, because you did just have $50 for all of them back in the Wii's life cycle, but at the same time, this is a remaster. It's not as if they're just ripping the original two Metroid games and just slapping them onto a Wii disc along with 3 and calling it a day. they are actually putting in work to make it look prettier, and yeah, I'm all for that. Go for it. I'm quite happy with that. And they're also making sure that it has proper dual analog controls. It's got I'm assuming that it'll have the gyro control as well, similar to what they did with Skyward Sword, to make sure that you can still play it that way if you so desire. And they've also got, I think, the traditional way to aim as well, I think, built in there as well. So, all in all, seems like a good deal. So, if you want that, you can buy it right the hell now, so that's cool. So, good stuff. And you managed to avoid the Skyward Sword issue by charging 40 instead of 60, so that's always nice. I do wonder where Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are, but then again, if you were able to remaster one of them, remastering the rest should be relatively straightforward now that you can reuse the remastered assets to, well, on whatever you needed to do to remaster it in the first place. I would assume that it would be a slightly simpler task. Although there may be some models and whatnot you'd have to work on as well, but I'm sure it'll work out just fine. So that's pretty much everything that needs to be said for the Metroid Prime remasters, so continuing on with the trend of nostalgia baiting, we've got stuff for the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance coming to the Nintendo Switch Online service, which is nice. So there wasn't anything in the initial wave that I was desperate to play or desperate to check out, although I do have that copy of Link's Awakening that was showcased in the Nintendo Switch Online version built into my Game Boy, so I was considering whether it made sense to emulate it and try it out for either a live stream or covering it on Through the Looking Glass for the review channel, and this might be the excuse I need to try that out. And honestly, the fact that they put the GBA stuff behind the expansion pack for the Nintendo Online stuff, I'm okay with that. That is the stuff that I'd probably be more interested in, especially since in the future releases I saw Golden Sun listed, and despite knowing nothing about it, whenever people talk about Advance Wars or any old GBA games that they really want to see, Golden Sun always ends up listed for whatever reason. No idea why. Know nothing about it. All I know is everybody talks it to death, so when that shows up, maybe that will be the excuse I need in order to actually buy it. So, yeah. Good stuff. They're adding stuff to the service and not charging extra for it, so you know what? If you've been paying into it, yep, that seems worthwhile. Hopefully the emulation is a little better than what they did for the N64 games. And then finally, we've got the big announcement that they saved at the end, which was more stuff for Tears of the Kingdom, because that's clearly what we needed, right? More Tears of the Kingdom, where they show us everything and nothing once again, just to get us hyped up and say, hey, it's coming out in May, we haven't moved the date yet, go get it, it's gonna be great. And to be fair, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who greatly enjoy that game, but I'm sat here going, am I going to enjoy this though? Because it seems like they haven't really showed us all that much about the core gameplay loop. They've showed us bits and pieces of what you'll be able to do, and given that it was originally just going to be DLC for Breath of the Wild, it is probably safe to assume that there's going to be a lot of cool stuff you can do in it, but I don't know, I am personally hesitant because I'm probably one of the only people in the world who thought Breath of the Wild was just okay. And I know that's going to be a controversial statement, and I doubt that I could properly explain it while I'm just rambling, so all I will say right now is that I'm not the biggest fan of open world games, and part of the reason for that is because a lot of what I grew up with as a child, I had a very clear understanding between myself and the games I played. I knew that when I went into an area, I had exactly what I needed in order to succeed, and if I didn't, it was either because of RNG in the case of something like Diablo, or it was because of a game balance issue. That was typically what it boiled down to. Any issue that I could point to was either a skill issue, which sometimes came into play, or it was a game balance issue. In fact, that whole mentality is part of the reason why when I'm reviewing stuff, the main thing that I focus on isn't necessarily how visceral the combat is or how well it's all presented and all that fun stuff. My main concern is usually game balance. And unfortunately for open world games, the ability to go anywhere at any time means that it can be very difficult to properly balance, and as a result of that, you end up either leaving a bunch of stuff unanswered, which is subjectively unsatisfying to me, or you end up in a case where you may try to brute force it and not end up having all that much fun. So I'm always of two minds when I'm talking about open world games because I know they have an audience. There can be a nice sense of, ooh, I'm gonna see what's over there, it's gonna be great, and sometimes there's something interesting, sometimes it's just a cool view. And for people who like that kind of game, I'm sure Tears of the Kingdom will be great. The problem is, I'm not that guy. Although, I've been thinking of buying it and covering it anyway for the review channel, even if I probably wouldn't stream or record a Let's Play of it, because part of me is wondering, if how I played Breath of the Wild had anything to do with it. Because at the time I bought it, it was my first Switch game, it had been hyped up to hell and back for me, and as a result, I went in with high expectations, only to, well, there were a couple of problems I ended up having with it that I realized in hindsight. First of all, I didn't have a TV or a capture card that I could hook my Switch into, which I didn't personally mind because it was just a matter of, okay, I'll just treat it as a handheld device like it would treat the GBAs I have. And I still have them on the shelf over there. They're really nice. So I could treat it like that for a while, at least until I could save up the money to, 1, buy a good PC, and then 2, put a capture card in it so that I could record Switch gameplay, which I ended up primarily using for Fire Emblem for a while. So because of that, I ended up not necessarily being able to enjoy the cool vistas as much as everybody else, and on top of that, I also forgot to turn off gyro aiming, which meant that trying to do that on handheld mode was stupid. So part of me is thinking, okay, so you'd probably give the game a 6 out of 10 because you're a cynic, but is that because of how you played it or because of the game itself? Because there are things in the game that you can objectively point to and say, okay, that was probably ill-conceived, such as the fact that there's not a lot of gameplay variety when you get to the Divine Beasts and whatnot, and also the fact that the lack of weapon permanence means you're disincentivized from using the really cool stuff, even if it does technically incentivize you to use literally everything else. So there's not necessarily a sense of permanent progress, well, not as much of a sense of permanent progress, I should say. Instead, the permanent progress is more a matter of, okay, I've got this useful ability now, so I guess I've just got that, that's useful. Oh, and I've got a bit more stamina and health, that's nice, I guess. But because you're not necessarily visibly seeing it outside of the rare times when the abilities trigger, such as Rivali's Gale and all that fun stuff, it just didn't land for me. So I'm wondering how much of it was the game itself and how much was how I played it. And so I'm very tempted to buy it and review it on the review channel just to see, okay, was this me or was this the game? Because this time I can hopefully approach it with more accurate expectations, and hopefully I can just sit down with it, give it its time of day, see if it is actually a matter of me, if it's a matter of the game, and whatever the case may be, I can then report back and hopefully have an interesting perspective. Or I can get myself into a lot of trouble. I'm pretty sure someone got their website DDoSed by giving Breath of the Wild a 7 out of 10, so I have no idea what would happen if I dared shame Tears of the Kingdom's name, but we'll see what happens. It will depend on how good the game is. So this is all assuming that the core fanbase likes it. And at this point, I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't. So we'll see how it plays out. Although, I am hesitant to buy it purely on the fact that it costs $70. I'm really torn about the trend of AAA games costing $70 now. On one hand, inflation is a bitch. I get that. And you do need to actually make a profit on the games you make. And I know that the Switch, well, and I know that Nintendo has had lower profits lately, and they are still effectively promising to give their staff in Japan a 10% pay raise, which is good. That is good for them. It seems that they are confident in what they have on the release slate for them to do that, which, good. Good. I'm glad to see that you are treating your staff correctly. And to Nintendo's credit, irrespective of any problems they have as far as copyright and community management, they do well by their staff so far as I can tell. Unless you're QA or in America, I guess, but that's a whole other topic depending on who you believe and who you trust. Regardless, I don't know what I feel about the $70 just upfront cost though, because I don't know. It's technically better than trying to nickel and dime me with an expansion pass, though you're probably going to try and toss an expansion pass onto it anyway. And it's not as if this is a company like EA where I'm looking at it with suspicion, and yet the fact remains that it seems like the stigma around charging $70 for games right now has effectively been broken, and it's also the reason why, despite Star Wars Jedi Survivor coming out in a couple of months, I'm not going to buy it on release. I'm going to wait for it to be on sale. Although the thing is though, this is Nintendo. They don't put their games on sale if you want it new. You basically have to go bargain bin hunting at GameStop 2 years later if you want to get them on sale. Or you gotta wait for the very rare sale for a local retailer, or I guess an in-person retailer to be more accurate. So, I don't know. I'm very torn on that count. So, if I'm not willing to accept it when it's coming from EA, should I make a distinction when Nintendo does it? I don't know. Especially considering that I don't know how much time I'm necessarily going to have to even look at the game to begin with, because thinking through my schedule for the review channel, I'm still working on a Pillars of Eternity review that's taking far longer to complete than I expected. I've got a couple other games I want to try and squeeze in before Baldur's Gate 3 releases, and then once that game comes out, that's going to dominate my time for a while. And I'll probably use it as the excuse to bring back the Wednesday night stream slot, once that I get a better handle on the project backlog for the unscripted channel, as well as get further along with projects for the review channel. So thinking on that, I'm really torn. I don't know if it is a good idea to actually buy Tears of the Kingdom. Would I even have time for it? Because my concern right now is that once Advance Wars comes out, that's going to be priority one, bar none. I'm basically going to drop everything, or effectively drop everything. I'll still be keeping up with the bare minimum in order to keep the stream schedule going, to keep the Let's Play stuff going on this channel, to make sure that I'm finish up the Pillars of Eternity video if it does take that long to finish up. But once that it's done, once that the Advance Wars remaster is out, that's probably just going to end up completely dominating my time. Which means if there is any game that I want to play before then, I've basically got until April to finish playing through Fire Emblem Engage and one other game in order to properly review both of those. So it's gonna be rough. I honestly don't know if I'll even have time for Tears of the Kingdom, purely on that basis. So we'll see. We will see. It is still very much up in the air as to what I want to do with it, so time will tell. I am sure you will let me know what you think in the comments if something I said is objectionable. Regardless, that'll be all from me. For those of you who are newer to the channel, this is a kind of a different style of video that I'm trying out. I'd been thinking for a while between the review channel where everything is heavily scripted and the unscripted channel where everything's off the cuff. I've been trying to find a healthy medium for that, where I can just talk about whatever's on my mind. And my initial thought was, okay, just take out the microphone, write a brief outline, and then just start rambling. Although, the problem is that every time I've tried to do it, it's just been a matter of, okay, you're in front of your computer, you're in your environment which you use to be very careful with everything you say, to the point where someone called you an AI in one of your videos. Seriously, I've had some very interesting comments about my delivery style on the review channel. It's been amusing, to be fair. I personally think it's fine, because I am going for something more serious and more precise with the review channel, but for the unscripted channel, more laid back, why not? So I figured this time what I'd do is I'd just pace around my room a little bit with a microphone in hand rather than just have it on the mic stand. So let me know what you think of this style. If it works, I might do it for Fire Emblem Engage at some point just to try and get my thoughts in order, because I've been very conflicted about that game. Gameplay is great, I've been having a good time with that, but the story's just been such a letdown. And I know that I can't necessarily make too many comparisons to Three Houses, at least in terms of tone or whatnot, but in terms of substance, there's just nothing there. Or there's just so little that it's all surface level. Every time I have a conversation that I like, or see a support conversation I like, there's about 5 more that are just the same talking one over and over. It's... I got problems with that game. That's the short version. So I'll probably just do one of these rambles when the time comes just to try and get my thoughts in order, because I'm going to need to play that game twice. Once in hard mode as an opportunity to see all of the story content, or at least as much as I can without buying the expansion pass. And then a second time in maddening mode to get a sense for what the gameplay can really do when it ramps up. So, trying to get both of those done. That's going to be fun, especially since I'm recording the hard mode run as a Let's Play. And probably will do the same for the maddening mode run given what I'm doing for Three Houses right now. Either way, that'll be all from me. So, let me know what you think of this format, if it's something that would be worth trying out for anything else. Let me know in the comments below what you think about what the Nintendo Direct had to show for itself, and yeah, I guess I'll see you for the next video or live stream. Take care.